Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapons series. I am your host, Captain Matt, and today we're talking about how to buy a used cruiser. And we're going to stick with the 24 to 50 foot range. That there's some big changes that happen when you're over 45, 50 feet. So we're going to focus on that, and we're going to talk about what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about if it's right for you, what they're good for, what they're not good for. We're going to talk about drive systems, galleys, heads, staterooms, gens, AC, etc. And we're going to go through all the different areas of them, how to avoid somebody else's headache, the number one inspection that you must do, finance and insurance tips. And at the end, I've got a special opportunity for you. So let's start with what they're good for. Now, I want to show this real quick because there's cruisers, which are the one on the right, and there's a cuddy cabin, which has a little cabin, but it's smaller, it's shorter. It's a different style of boat. Although there is a closed section up front that has a cabin, it's a smaller area with just a small sleeping area, maybe a small head, maybe a small sink, and that's about it. A cruiser, on the other hand, is going to be a little bit taller. You can typically stand up or come close to standing up, depending on the size of it. It's going to have a full bathroom. Typically, it's going to have sleeping areas. It's going to have a galley. It may even have a shower. It may have air conditioning, and it may have. I call them a condo on the water. It may have pretty much everything you need to stay on that boat for a couple of days, up to a week, up to live aboard. As you get up to the 45, 50 foot range, you could potentially stay on that as a live aboard. So that's what they're great for. Great for entertaining, great for overnighting, and can be a lot of fun, but there's a lot of decisions that need to be made as you're looking, and you're going to come across as you hit different sizes. There's going to be a break point in things like the propulsion. So do you want a single engine or a twin engine? At about 28 to 30, 32 feet, somewhere in that range, depending on the manufacturer, you'll find the option to have a single engine or twin engines. The single engine obviously is a little bit less expensive to maintain. You only have to worry about that single engine. Not necessarily more fuel efficient, because it has to work to push all of the weight of that boat, whereas the twin engines may or may not be more fuel efficient. It just kind of depends. But you have two engines to maintain, and there's just more of everything that goes along with it. At a certain point, though, you want the twin engines because it gives you better maneuverability as the boat size gets bigger and bigger. And again, usually around 28 to 30, low 30s. I've run a 31 footer with a single engine, and that's probably about as big as you're going to go with a single before you move on to the twin. And these are twin stern drives that you see pictured here. But another decision that you have is gas versus diesel. A Caterpillar, a Yanmar diesel engine versus a gas engine. And again, it's typically going to be based on size. Usually around 40 foot or so, you'll start to see more diesel engines. Diesel engines are going to be much, much more expensive up front, but much cheaper to maintain. A diesel engine is a workhorse. It will run 10,000 hours when it's well taken care of. 20, 30,000 hours, you can rebuild it and then keep going. A gas engine is typically going to have a useful life of about 1,000 to 1,500 hours, again, when it's well maintained. The cost to run a gas engine is a little bit more. Fuel typically, depending on what's going on with gas prices, a little bit less expensive, a little less expensive to maintain. The diesel engine is going to be 20, 30, 40,000 more new, but the lifespan of that engine is going to be, and the cost to maintain is typically going to be less. So it's something to consider. Also, can you get diesel fuel where you boat? If you're at the coast, if you're on a lake, you may or may not have access to it. So you want to consider that as well. And if you don't have access to diesel, you may need to get your search under around that 40 feet marker, and just be aware of it. Okay. Stern drive versus V drive. they're going to be twin engines in almost every case. I guess you can find a few single engine V drives. Essentially, the V drive, the engine's in the boat. There's a shaft that goes forward and then V's back out to a big brass prop. You can see them in the picture there. The arrows pointing to the prop. The stern drive, again, engine in the boat with the lower unit and the props out there. You'll see these are Bravo 3 drives with the counter rotating prop, and they're very common to see on a twin engine boat. They're the Mercruiser version. Volvo is the other one. So when you're looking at stern drive versus V drive, a few advantages. The stern drives are going to typically perform a little bit better as far as top speeds go, maneuverability. The V drive is going to be cheaper to maintain, especially when you leave the boat in the water. All you have is that running gear down there with is a shaft and a brass prop. You put some zincs or anodes to protect your metal there, and you've got minimal maintenance on the drive system. You have your typical maintenance on the engine, but you have minimal maintenance on the drive, and you can leave the boat in the water for a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years before you need to pull it. Do your service, paint your bottom, and do the other maintenance that's required. Where the stern drives, if you leave those in the water for 2 or 3 years, in most situations you're going to pull them up. You're going to have a lot of corrosion, a lot of growth, and potentially some major problems with your bellows and with the corrosion and eating through the gear casing. So if you're keeping the boat in the water, I would tend to lean a little bit more towards the V drives. And again, the bigger the boat, you'll hit a point where stern drives don't make sense anymore, and you'll move over to the V drive system. Usually in the high 30s is where you'll hit that tipping point, high 30-foot range, 36, 38, somewhere around there is where you'll typically move over to the inboard system or the V drives, which is on the right. As far as one being better than another, outside of the performance, I like handling the V drives around the docks. You've got that big rudder, you've got the big propeller. You can move a big 38, 40 footer a little bit easier with those big propellers, and when you know how to do it. But it's typically going to be based on where you're going to store the boat, how you're going to keep the boat, and the size. Now, there are some other systems. I had some questions on one of my videos to talk a little bit more about the Zeus and the Axios and the IPS drives. These are joystick docking systems. Mercury and Mercruiser has a joystick system right now in 2020 for outboards and stern drive called the Axios. It works just like a video game. When you get at the helm, you move the joystick sideways and the boat moves sideways. You can spin it within its radius, and it is, I mean, it is so simple. A novice can operate this boat. Zeus is the similar joystick system, but it's on their pod drive, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. It's the inboard version, but instead of having that shaft and rudder, they put a pod down there with rotates, I think it's like 240 degrees or something, and it gives you the same maneuverability, just in a little bit different drive system on some of the bigger boats. Volvo has this called the IPS system. It's the joystick on their pod system. They do it just a little bit different, but essentially it's the same thing. It's taking the controls, and instead of putting them in throttle and shift and a steering wheel, which adjusts the rudder or the stern drive, it's all digital, and it's run through a computer and this joystick remote. And with that joystick is how you handle the boat. Typically in tight water situations around the dock, slow water maneuvering, but you can also run it in open water. I've never run the IPS system. I've only run the Axios and the Zeus, but I assume that the Volvo IPS works the same way, where you can run it in open water with the joystick. If you look at those, they started in about 2007, 2000, and maybe 2008 is when they came out on in the Mercruiser world. But just pay attention that do the research in the year that you're looking at it. They had some issues with software and with control and with the hardware as they were first figuring this out. Now it's become a pretty stable option But do some research if you're looking at some of those late 2008, 2009, 2010 models, and see what they're saying about the joystick system in those boats. This is what that Zeus and IPS drive looks like, that pod drive. Again, you've got the engine in the boat. It's an inboard engine, and you've got that pod drive. Everything below the white is inside the boat, and then you've got that little pod that sticks out. Now, those pods are very expensive. If you hit a stump, they're designed just to knock off, send a diver down to go get them. I think they're like 10 or 15, maybe 20,000 to replace the pod itself. But they're designed to, if you hit something, just to knock off and go dive down for them. May or may not be a good system depending on what type of water you run in, but that's how most of them are. And again, the rotation of that pod is done through the joystick control system in the Zeus and the IPS. Again, do your research on those drives. So you got stern drive, single and twin. You've got the inboard or V drive system, and then you have the pod drives, which are joystick controlled. So that's the drive system. It's really going to be dependent on the size of boat that you have. So a 24 footer, you're just going to have the option of a single engine gas stern drive. That's going to be your only option. As you get into that 28, 30 footer, you're going to start to hit that twin engine range. As you get into the high 30s, you're going to hit the stern drive inboard, our V drive system. And then at mid 30s and up, you're going to have the option to add some of the joystick controls. Because of the cost associated with it, they typically don't start putting those on until you hit the 30, 35 foot range. And then you'll have those as an option. If you're looking used, it's just going to depend on what's in the market. Now, the next thing to look at when you're looking at a used boat is, does it have a generator or not? When you start to hit that 28 foot range, 26 maybe, they can squeeze some smaller ones in there in some of the newer boats. You're going to be hard pressed to find a 26 footer with a generator in it. As you get above 28, you're typically always going to have a generator, but you want to know if that's the case. If you do have a generator, you're going to want to inspect it. You're going to want to find out when the oil was changed. How does it run off the fuel system of the boat, or does it have its own separate fuel source? If it's a gas generator on a diesel boat, you want to know that. You want to know when the impeller has been changed, what the maintenance of this unit is. Those generators, one, can be expensive to replace, and two, can be very difficult to replace depending on exactly where it's located in the engine room. It may not be the easiest swap out. So you want to do your inspection on the generator. It's a mechanical item that if it hasn't been used a lot, hasn't been treated properly, could be a major issue for you. That could be very expensive. So don't forget the generator. Fire it up. Make sure you run it for a good half hour. Put some load on it. Run some of the systems and see what you got. And find out when that impeller has been changed. And I would recommend, if it's the boat you buy, just change that impeller and keep it changed every year or two, depending on the water that you're in. The panel. When you're looking at cruisers, there's a lot going on. You've got the potential for a generator, you've got the potential for heat and air, but the panel, it's the control source for everything electric. The panel on the left is one without a generator. So you'll notice that you've got 120 volts, which is shore power, and 12 volts, which is running off your battery system. So some of the things like the refrigerator, the microwave, the water heater are only going to run when you're plugged into shore power. The boat on the left does not, or the picture on the left does not have a generator. So even though you may have air conditioning, that air conditioning is only going to work when you're plugged into shore power. So you want to know that. You want to know how that panel works, what systems you have and don't have, what works at shore power, what works on the generator, and what runs off the battery. It's important to know that before you buy it, so you know, is it the right choice, but also it's important to know and have somebody walk you through it so you know how to operate it. This can be something where if you don't run the panel properly, you can cause some issues. You can cause an issue with another system, overloading with electricity. It's a major issue. The panel on the right has a generator, and I know that because there's a little switch I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a little switch right here, which you can switch it from shore power over to generator power. And that is going to help you when you're out in the water. You can run the generator, and now you can run everything as if you're on shore power. When you come back to your marina, you can plug in, and now you can switch, turn that generator off, run the AC, the refrigerator, the entertainment system, typically off the 120 volt power from the shore power or from the generator. Going through that panel, understanding it, understanding how to operate it should be part of your pre-purchase inspection, so you know what everything is. And I'm going to encourage you, if you're looking at a used boat, to go through every single system. Know if it works, know if it doesn't work, and know how it works, so that when you take ownership of the boat, you are on top of everything that's going on. Now, if your boat's equipped with air conditioning, it's important to inspect that air conditioning system and not just turn on the AC and does it work for a couple minutes, yep, and then move on. You want to run it on the shore power. You want to run it on the generator, which means you have to be in the water. To run that generator, you've got to be in the water, because that generator is going to pick up seawater or lake water to cool it down. So you need to be there, and the AC needs to be in the water so that you can pick up the water and cool the condenser coils, and you kind of see what it looks like. You want to check the strainers. You'll notice in the diagram that the strainer is where the water's picking up from the bottom of the boat. It's running it through a strainer in case you're in some shallow water and some debris, putting in that sea pump, running it to the condenser coil, running it through the AC unit to keep it cool, and then kicking it out the boat. And you'll hear that when it's running. You'll hear every now and again at the marina, you hear the water kick on and start peeing into the lake or the bay, and you'll know that boat has air conditioning and it's running. You want to check that strainer. You want to check the pump. You want to check the condenser coils. You want to go through the whole system and make sure that everything's looking good, that you're not seeing corrosion, that you're not seeing issues, and then put that AC unit down to a low temperature, 60, 58, so you can run it continuously and run it for a good 20 minutes. Put some load on that unit, put some load on the generator. How does everything work? And then do the same thing and run it while you're on shore power, because there can be an issue on either side of it. There can be an issue with the pulling from the gen. There can be an issue pulling from shore power. There can be an issue just with the air conditioning unit itself. And it'll be helpful to know when you understand all three combinations, and you've run it for a good 20 minutes on each of those. Okay, so the AC unit, again, if you have a generator, can be run all the time. If you don't have a generator, it can only be run on shore power. Okay. With that AC unit, it likely is going to have some heat. It likely is going to have a dehumidifying setting. Run each of those for an extended period of time, so you know exactly what you have. And again, you've got to be in the water to do this. So it may be something, if the boat's on the hard, you can do all your inspections, and then during the sea trial or the survey, which I highly recommend on cruisers, because there's so many systems, and there's so many things that you may not know how to check, the strainers and the filters and all that the surveyor will, and may be able to find you an issue, even though it may cost 500, $1,000. It's done by the foot. It could save you a lot. Next, we move to the galley. So the galley is the kitchen area. So you typically are going to have a sink, you're going to have a microwave, maybe a coffee maker, maybe a refrigerator, maybe an ice maker. Depending on the size of the boat, you may even have a dishwasher. You may have a stovetop. It really depends on the boat that you're looking at. But again, just like with every system, you want to operate everything. So that means turn the AC on, and while you're running the AC on the generator, fire up the refrigerator, put the microwave on for a couple of seconds with a cup of water in there. Run the stove top. If it's an electric, if it's an alcohol stove, if it's an older boat, you want to run that as well. Although it's not going to be pulling off the generator, you want to know how that works, know what fuel source it's using, how to turn it on and off. And then you've got your sink, which is going to be pulling from a fresh water tank. You want to check that fresh water tank and make sure there's no growth in there what can happen on these cruisers is there's a freshwater tank that gets a little bit of water left in it, and it's not treated properly. And after a year or so, depending on the climate, it can start getting growth in there, little algae, and it's disgusting and it's really hard to clean out. Not not difficult to clean out, but time consuming to clean out because you've got to get it all cleared out, run some bleach through the system, and it can start clogging up some of the pumps. It can start clogging up the faucets. So you want to run the water through every single faucet. You want to put a fresh water in there, see what you've got. Maybe run some bleach through it, just a little, maybe a 10% bleach solution through it, so you know exactly where you're sitting and know what's working and what's not working. You also want to pay attention, are there any leaks in the water system? Is there somewhere where you're turning the water on and now it's leaking into the bilge compartment somewhere? So the galley, when you're inspecting the galley, it's not just how does the galley look, but what's happening behind the scenes, behind the walls that you may not be able to notice. But if you're listening for water running, if you're looking for water in the bilge, if you're looking for water in some of the compartments in the cabin, you will find these issues before you make the purchase of the boat, and that's key. If you've watched any of my videos, you know my goal is not to turn you away from a boat. My goal is to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting, exact conditions, so you can make a smart decision about, is this a good price to pay for the boat in this condition with this, that, and the other thing that need to be addressed. Okay, so that's the galley. And again, you're going to do the refrigerator, the microwave on shore power and on the generator, because you want to test the loads of the entire system on both systems. Okay, um, the head compartment. Again, just like we talked about the galley with the sinks, you want to test the water, you want to test the shower, make sure you've got the pressure that you need. You want to check the drainage. Where is the drain? Where is the drainage going? And is it going to a pump somewhere? Typically, it's going to a bilge pump, and it's going to pump it either overboard or into the gray water tank, or into the wastewater tank. So you want to check all of that, and you want to open up the compartment wherever it is in the boat, and you want to find those pumps, and you want to check and make sure they're exercised, and make sure they're running properly. Make sure there's not a bunch of hair stuck in the pump coming out of the head compartment. You want to check all of that, and make sure that it's looking good. You also, as you're in the head compartment, you want to test the head itself. So if you have a vacuum flush system, if you've got a porta potty system, whatever the system you have, you want to make sure that the water's flowing in, that the suction and the flushing is happening properly, and then you also want to test the pump out and make sure that you can pump it out, and again, that nothing's leaking, that there's all the fittings are together, and that everything is working the way you want it, and that there's no major odor concerns that are going to happen. So that may be tough if the waste compartment or the waste tank is completely pumped out and they've treated it. You may not know until it's used, but you want to go through as much of that process as you can so that you can tell exactly where you're going to be. Okay. Next, we move into the staterooms and the sleeping quarters. This is one where I really encourage you, if you're going to be overnighting, if you're going to be spending a couple of days, get whoever's going to be overnighting with you and spend even just a half hour to an hour down in that cabin to determine, is it going to suit your needs. Set it up in the daily configuration where maybe the dinette table is set up, and everything's in the seating configuration, and then convert it. You'll notice in the picture, the yellow arrow is the V berth, set up in the sleeping area. Those middle two cushions will come out. A table will typically sit there, and you've got now a little dinette area. The blue arrow, where you've got the little dinette set up, that table will collapse down, and in some way or another will set even with the seats. The cushions will pull together, and now you've got a sleeping area there. And then you have your aft cabin, which typically is going to be a couch area, and that will adjust and fill in, and there'll be some seating there. Depending on the boat, depending on the manufacturer, depending on the year, all of the how it's going to work is going to change. The key is that you, one, know how to do it, make sure all the cushions and everything that you need are there, And two or three, make sure that it works for the style of boating that you're going to be doing. That if you've got a family of five, okay, where's everybody going to sleep, and is it going to be comfortable? Is it going to work for the way you need it to be? And are you going to be happy with it when you're on the boat for 3 days with your family and your gear and your food? Are you going to be happy the way everything is set up? And do you have the storage as you're looking at that? Where are you going to keep the food? Where are you going to have the drinks? Where are you going to keep your clothing and your get ready stuff? So that's all part of the stateroom and sleeping quarters, in my opinion. While you're inspecting it, you're thinking through all that, and you're kind of mentally placing things, and you're spending a significant amount of time down there, so you can tell how you're going to enjoy it and how it's going to work for you based on the layout and the setup of that particular cruiser. So the inspection. We've kind of gone through step by step, but you're going to check and make sure that the cockpit floor is stable. You're going to inspect the bottom of the boat and the exterior, the fiberglass. Does it have bottom paint? Are you going to need to bottom paint it if you're leaving it in the water? And I encourage, if you are leaving it in the water, you're going to bottom paint it every 2, maybe 3 years at the most, depending on how much you run it, and what type of water you're in. You're going to check the electronics, the stereo system, the VHF radio, the lights, the gauges, the switches, the upholstery, the canvas, the isinglass. Make sure that's in good shape. And some of this stuff may be stowed away, maybe tucked in a compartment on the boat, maybe hanging in somebody's garage or in their shed. So you want to make sure that you get a look at all this stuff, because if you need new upholstery and new isinglass for the camper canvas, that could be $3,000 to $5,000 depending on the boat, and you'll want to know this stuff up front, and not just take their word for it that, one, they'll get it to you, and two, that it's in good condition, because things can dry rot, things can get all nasty when they're in storage if it's not put away properly. So get all that stuff up front. Hatches and latches, especially in the cabin, go through every single compartment. And you're looking for anything that doesn't feel right. Is there water somewhere where there shouldn't be? Is there corrosion somewhere? Is there a pump that's not working properly? And you want to exercise every single pump on the boat, because one of the worst things that could happen is the boat hasn't been run for a while. You go out the first day, you put it in, you turn on your AC, you're taking a shower. Next thing you know, your boat starts filling up with water, and one of your bilge pumps isn't working, because it hasn't been used for a while, and now the cabin of your boat floods from your shower. A clamp pops off, or a hose clamp pops off, and now you've got flooding in your cabin, and your boat has some major issues. These are things that you could find in the inspection, and it's something that a surveyor does a really good job of finding. Make sure that you find a good surveyor, somebody that's licensed, has a good reputation in your area. And I think on the cruisers, especially as you get more complicated with AC systems, with generators, it's really valuable to have a surveyor check all those systems. Now remember, a survey is not mechanically inspecting the boat. They're inspecting the system and the structural integrity of the boat. You still need to do your inspection on the engine compartment. You're checking wiring, corrosion, all systems in the cabin, and the pumps. We kind of talked about that as we went step by step through. The engine. So everything we've talked about now has just been the boat, and there's been a lot. But the engine is another key piece of it, especially if you have twins. You want to check the engine hours, the fluids, the oil. When was the last time the impeller's been changed? The compression of the cylinders, the prop conditions, the drive conditions, are the running gear, if it's an inboard, the stern drives or the pod. You want to inspect all of that so that you know exactly what you're looking at, and ask the questions of the owner. How has it been serviced? When it's been serviced? Who has done the service? So you know kind of what the history looks like of that particular boat. Now, just like any boat, you need to do a test drive. If you haven't operated a larger cruiser, it's a little bit intimidating for some people. So maybe bring somebody with you that can help you out, or let the owner run through some of the maneuvers, and it can be an excellent training opportunity. But if possible, start it cold. First one, start for the day. Same thing with the generator, start it cold. Just kind of sit at the docks, listen at idle, pay attention to how you disembark. So there's a procedure that you need to get when you have a cruiser. It's disconnecting the shore power, putting the cables away, getting the electrical panel set up for your run, depending on how you're going to use it, getting that all adjusted. Now you've got to do the dock lines, and then you've got to do the fenders and pull out of the slip. And you can listen to the boat idle as you're going through all that, but you're also paying attention to how it's done so that when you take ownership, you are up to speed on how to operate the boat a little bit better, a little bit safer. So you're going to idle out to the open water. And you're just going to listen to how the boat sounds. You're going to run, maybe if it's twins, you're going to run one engine, the other one in neutral, and then you're going to switch, run the other engine, the starboard engine, and the port in neutral. Then you're going to run them both. How do they sound? Are they syncing up? Are there any vibrations that feel off? Once you idle a little ways out to open water, then you're going to get up on plane. You're going to go to wide open throttle to get it up on plane. How does it take off? Does it really take a long time to get that big heavy boat up out on top of the water and on plane, or does it kind of go out pretty quick? And are you comfortable with how that operates? Knowing, if you've got a 340 Sundancer, it's going to take you a couple of seconds to get that big bad boy up on top of the water, and that's just the way it's going to be. It's not nothing wrong with the boat, but there's just a big heavy boat that you got to get up and going. But understand how it operates. Pull that throttle back to about 3/4, and then do some maneuvering, whatever the proper throttle setting is for the boat. It's certainly not wide open, half throttle, 3/4 throttle, just up on plane. Again, if it's twins, you're listening for any vibration, any differences between the engines. Watching your tack setting, or if you've got a sync setting to adjust them together so that they run at the same RPMs, you want to listen for that. You're really listening for vibrations. You're just listening to the overall sound of the boat. Then you're going to do some turns. How does the boat handle? If you've got trim tabs or trim, if it's a stern drive, you want to adjust the trim, see how the boat reacts, make sure everything's working properly, and get the feel for it. Now, you're going to go ahead and come back to an idle setting, come back to neutral, and you're going to sit in the water, and you're going to go in and out of gear, forward, neutral, reverse with each of the engines, and you're listening for how the sound of it going in and out of gear, does it sound right, and just the overall ride quality. Some of the cruisers can be a little bit tippy, which means that if you don't get the trim tab set just right and your weight shifts in the boat, it's going to tip back and forth a little bit. That's typically more common on the smaller boats under 26, 28 feet, but something you want to be aware of so that when you're out on the water, you're happy with the ride quality of the boat. And the only way to do that is to test drive it. I just saw a thread on Facebook the other day that the guy bought a boat, didn't have an opportunity to test drive it because the dealer said that it wasn't going to work with their timing. So they just ran it on the hose, got home, and found all sorts of issues that would have been discovered had they done their sea trial or their test drive. If it has a trailer, you want to inspect the trailer while the boat's off it. I've got a whole video on inspecting the trailer. I've also got a whole video on inspecting a boat as well that you can check out. That will be in the notes. Financing. If you're financing a used cruiser, you want to watch our how to find the best boat loan video. But typically you're going to look at a local credit union if you're buying through a dealer, and a marine lender. Local and national banks typically don't have the best overall terms, but you might as well check all of them to get the best information. Again, watch that video on boat loans, and you will get a lot more detailed information there. Boat insurance, depending on where you're keeping it, and these numbers are actually off. 500 is going to be fairly low, especially if you're leaving it in the water, especially if you're at the coast or in a hurricane zone. $1,200, it could be much more than that as you go up to 50 foot. It's going to be based on again, the location of the boat. It's going to be based on your history of operating a boat and the overall cost of the boat. So that's probably the range is really significant from 24 to 50 foot, and depending on the price of it. But check out our video on boat insurance and you get some more details there. We also, if you're looking at a cruiser, this is you have to have this. It's the Boat Buyer Secret Weapon Toolkit. It's going to walk you through and give you a checklist on how to inspect everything so you don't miss any of the systems, how to demo a boat the right way, questions to ask for dealers and private sellers. If you've got a trade, how to maximize your trade. We go into a little bit on boat loans and insurance. There's a cost of ownership calculator, a lot of great stuff. That's at boatbuyersecretweapon.com/toolkit. And we just give that to you for free. We want to make sure that if you're looking at a used boat, that you get one that's really going to do exactly what you want it to do, and you're going to find the right boat at the best price. We also have our magic money saving method, which is how to find the right boat and get the best price on it. It's really the best negotiation technique when you're buying a boat. If you get the toolkit, you'll get a special opportunity to get a discount on it. And it's the way we support the channel basically. So check that out, boatbuyersecretweapon.com/save. Subscribe to the channel. We would love for you to subscribe, get all the updates on our newest videos. And YouTube has also recommended some videos for you that they think you will find valuable. We would love a comment. We would love a like and a share. That really helps us get the word out about this channel. Just valuable, free information, unbiased, trying to help people find the right boat at the best price, so that they can enjoy the boating lifestyle like my family has and like I have since I was 5 years old. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you on the next video.